You're listening to the 4-Phase Cycle Podcast with your hosts, Dr. Alex and Megan of ZESTY Ginger. If you're looking to naturally balance hormones and learn how to work with your body instead of against it, you've definitely come to the right place. As a duo of an integrative MD and a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner and best friends, we use the 4 phases of the female cycle in combination with functional lab work and mindset practices to transform the lives of the women we work with.
We also have a whole lot of fun along the way. If you're new around here, it's best to start with season 1 before jumping around and plan to roll up your sleeves. Showing up for ourselves and enjoying our lives is what good health is all about. Just a quick reminder though, this information is not intended to diagnose, manage, or treat disease. Always consult with your doctor before making changes.
Hi there, Alex here. I am so excited to be moving along in our podcast series called Flowing with Your Cycle. If you haven't done so already, check out the companion guide for the 28 days. It's zestyginger.com/flow. And it'll really help guide a lot of what we're talking about here. Oh, gee, no pun intended. Companion guide. No, sorry. I just really like puns. So, if that was an eye roll moment for you, then awesome. I'm glad I could be that. All right. So today we are on day 10. And so we are still solidly planted into the second phase of the cycle as we head towards ovulation. Some of us with a naturally shorter cycle. Now, when I say that, the only way to really know what the natural cycle for an individual is in our experience is to actually support their body. If they're having symptoms, then it's to support the body and the underlying imbalances. If someone feels phenomenal and their cycle is great and things are flowing really well, right, then that is kind of their natural cycle because that's what supports them feeling good. However, the number of people in that category is still more of a minority in our world. Just, we've talked about this a million times, so I'm not going to go into it here, but there's more women who feel like their cycle impacts their life than not. And this is not just Megan and I saying this. This is if you go to the CDC and when you look up women's health facts, their estimation is that every 9 out of 10 women deal with disruptive cycle-related symptoms month after month. Right? So every 10 women you come across, 9 of them at any given point could be having an issue where that they feel like impacts them, right? They have symptoms that impact their lives month after month. And so that is why when you look at that, this isn't something that I'm guessing on. That's why the data exists. And with that, really helps Megan and I identify and correlate what we're seeing play out and kind of what the bigger picture is of what's going on. And so many of us are having cycles that have symptoms, and we've talked about how symptoms are simply a way for the body to communicate that there are things going on underneath the hood, right? Whatever, it's just an alert to let you know. And because of that, when people say, I have horrible XYZ and this is going on, I've had infertility, I have all sorts of stuff, they're like, but my cycle is this. It's a little hard to say then, is that truly someone's baseline? Or does that also reflect what is the same reasons that are setting up the symptoms that they have? So because there's no way to necessarily know that, right? I didn't actually know that my cycle is just 26 days until I went through the journey that I did, which I've obviously talked about here with the premature ovarian failure and the fertility, endometriosis, all of that stuff, till it really settled out enough for me to be like, with this stability and the correlation, this is what my cycle is. So sorry, that was a little bit of a long segue, but I just wanted to clarify that, and that's really kind of where you fall out ultimately. It's the same as, perimenopause. Everyone's like, oh yeah, it sucks. But right, if 9 out of 10 women start in their, reproductive years with imbalances and then go into perimenopause where things are shifting and there's, organ systems are communicating differently and taking on more or less responsibility, it's really hard to say if it's like, does your perimenopause have to suck, or is it just all the other stuff that's already been going on? So that is the cycle stuff. But once you reach the point, some people will just have shorter cycles and some people will just have longer cycles. That in and of itself, like the length that's set for you, is not dictated by you have to be as close to 28 days as possible. It's just whatever happens month after month after month when you are in a place where you feel good. And so, just a reminder, let's not be absolute about this stuff. But generally speaking, if you have a shorter cycle, like 26 days for Megan and I, and I don't know why it's the same for us. It's just how it is. I don't think it means anything, right? So if you're longer, you're not like, oh no. But the ovulation then happens, day 11, day 12, day 13, fairly predictably. And so, depending on what happens for you, day 10 may be coming up closer to the tail end. That's okay. If you know that about yourself, you can absolutely tailor it. Still listen to the podcast in the 28 days because it'll still give you insight into what's happening during that time. But if you don't have a full 7 days, that's okay. That's where the mixing and matching, like, what is it that you feel right now, right? And that's a lot of the work that we've been putting in already, is how do we bring it back to our own internal insights and move ahead in our life following those rather than what someone else is telling us. So whether day 10 for you is still, you're still a ways out from ovulation, if you're really bumping up against it, no worries. But that is essentially potentially where people can deviate. That segue, not, having been said, day 10 today, we're going to talk all about communication, because the other thing that phase 2 is really great for is that, in addition to kind of having the clarity and the insights that you got from phase 1, and then to really be able to take the massive action steps that then propel your life and your health to where you want to be, the other part of that is that often this whole process includes other people, because we are not generally in a vacuum, or really ever, because we all come from somewhere, right? And so the interactions with people then are almost always, at each phase of the cycle, you're interfacing and people are mirroring back to you what you're experiencing. They're rubbing up against you, like triggering. I don't mean physically, hopefully not physically, but unless you consented to that kind of thing. But they're kind of rubbing up the trigger points so that we can have insight and clarity on what happens, right? So as you take massive action steps, then sometimes people, like our partners or our best friends or our family members, feel a little bit like, gosh, look at them go. Why am I not going? Right? And then they bring their stuff. And then in bringing up their stuff, right, oftentimes it's mirrored in what's already active in us. So if we're like, we're going along our business, I'm going to reach out to that person I've been wanting to be on their podcast about, right? Like, this is what happened with James Wedmore and us, is we wanted to be on his podcast, and then at some point we started interacting and we're eventually on it. But you start taking these leaps where you're like, holy cow, years ago we were talking about this, and now we're actually taking the steps to get there. Like, that's wild. And up leveling often feels a little bit like, holy cow, what am I doing? And it rubs up against that. But when you're really clear on that, you take the massive step anyways. Now, if they come back, your partner, whoever it is, let's just say partner, but it can be anyone, they see you growing and they're like, wow, look at them go. But look at my life over here. I'm not doing that stuff. Now they want to, equilibrate again. They don't want to see that. And it just depends on how they react to that. But most of the time it looks like some sort of interaction, right? Some sort of where hey, that kind of bumped up against the corners of their world. And then if that comes through, it can trigger the doubt that you've essentially been kind of, you're like, I hear you, doubt. I know I may not be on that podcast, or it may not go the way I want. And still, I know that that's where I'm going. I feel drawn to it. I feel called to it. I'm going that way, right? As they mirror back to you, they like, can you really do it, right? Because they're feeling a way about themselves. Then it highlights what you already had going on. Because if you had no doubt about what you were doing, or any one of us were doing, then someone coming up to you saying something would never bother you, right? It's like someone coming up to me and be like, I hate your blonde hair. And in my head, I'd be like, well, I'm sorry you feel that way. Like, I don't have blonde hair. So there's really nothing I'm going to feel about that because it doesn't reflect me. That's not the way I see myself. But when we're in that growth environment, just because we take steps doesn't mean that the reverberation of some sort of emotion or belief about ourselves isn't under the surface. Now sometimes people come and we see that while it feels not fun sometimes, the it is still, and this is super annoying, I hear you, it's really kind of a gift to be able to have someone highlight where we still have work to do. And yet, even with that, good communication, and I think I'm not the only one that says this, and I think it's kind of universally accepted in when we're talking about relationships in this world, is that good communication ends up being everything, because most of us can handle just about anything. You put humans into some crazy environment, we're really good at making it work. It's one of the coolest things about humans. We're kind of endlessly adaptable in some ways. And yet, what we like is if someone, you're having an experience with someone where you're mirroring each other and allowing that growth to happen, it's much easier than to roll with that happening and to overcome and break through whatever it is that's going on and learn the lessons that that experience is teaching us when we communicate well, right? There are times, this is kind of what it looks like. Megan and I, especially when we're together in the same space, you're around each other a lot. And so as with anyone else, you're around someone a lot, things just kind of come up in real time, and then they're the person with you to mirror it back to you. And so sometimes it looks like one of us being like, wow, I am just really freaking anxious today. Have a lot of fears coming up, just feeling really off. And, I've realized that because I was anxious, I was kind of being a little snippy with you, right? I don't totally understand why I'm anxious. I'm narrating as if I'm talking to Megan. I don't totally understand why I'm anxious. It is my intention to kind of verbalize this to you, to let you know that it's happening, to let you know, to share it with you so that you're looped in. There are times where I've been like, I'm sorry for the way I was acting, the last couple hours. I'm now having the insight of this is my stuff coming up, and because I couldn't put a label on it, now I'm finding ways to explain it through other things going on. And if she's the one there, a lot of times it's like, oh, if she was just, be a different way, I wouldn't feel this way, right? And so then when I am talking to her like that, and I'm just kind of like, this is what's going on for me. I realize I've been snippy. I'm really sorry. I'm not trying to be this is what's going on. There has never, at least so far in our relationship, been a moment where when I just flat out say whatever it is, like it could be some bizarre stuff, right? Then she's like, well, I hear what you're saying, like, yeah, of course I forgive you for being snappy, but like, what is it that you need? Right? She's generally not, we judge ourselves much easier, but for the most part, if it's someone you love, you're just like, okay, well, what I'm hearing is you're having a hard time. It actually has nothing to do with me. And what can I do to support you? What is it that you need? And we'll work through it. And so that can show up in a million different ways. But what happens then is, as we move, that communication piece ends up being really, really important. And we'll actually talk about communication at other times in the cycle as well, just because this isn't an isolated thing, in terms of as we move and shift and flow with things, our interactions with other people will also reflect that. So we'll be coming back to this, but really here I wanted to have this discussion of how does that actually show up in times where you're really like on the move and you're expanding as who you are, and the invitation to really look at that time as also a really good time. And this is supported with physiology in terms of how the brain goes and acquires information for the communication of ideas. As in phase 2, it's easier for us, especially when we've been doing the phase 1 stuff of really getting clear and insightful to ourselves, then because we have that power, we show up standing in our power, being very clear about who we are and what we are asking for. And that really helps conversations go more successfully. And what I mean by successfully is not that you don't fight, because that's not always the answer. Sometimes a fight is what you need. And so it doesn't, I mean, I think we all want communication to be calm and loving, but I think we also have to allow for the reality of, a lot of times people say by the time couples stop fighting, it's because neither one of them really cares enough to fight. And so that's the point I'm making. It's not that every fight or a conversation should be a fight. It's just that if it is, it doesn't necessarily represent a breakdown. A breakdown is when no communication happens at all. So as we stand in our power, it can go any number of ways, but what we are doing then is really allowing the people in our lives who will reflect our internal state back to us to be very much in the loop and in the know of what is going on with us and where are we steering the ship. And so this can be on very small topics. This can be on really big ones, but what I will kind of task you with for today is consider, are there any conversations or important discussions, or I shouldn't even say important, just discussions, whatever you deem that to be, that need to happen at this time for you to get what you need to head in the direction that you want. Okay? So whether it's having a discussion with your partner about what your goals are for nutrition or eating, right? So if your goal, I've used this before, is not to eat out as much and cook at home, what is it that your partner needs to know to support that? And is there something that you would like to ask them for, right? And then, because when we are in our own power, we feel that is kind of the best we feel about ourselves, right? We are connected to who we are. It's much easier than to hear the requests back from them. A lot of times it's like, okay, I hear you, you'd like to cook home more, and then they're like, but I hate cooking. So, I need XYZ from you to help you do this. And if that's how it goes, that's cool. So again, it's not that we need to ask for, like if I'm asking for something, I need to do something for you. That is not the relationship dynamic that I'm talking about here. because that comes with some conditionality a lot. It's just that the intention behind it is a little bit like, I'll do it for you if you do it for me, right? But that's not what we're doing in a partnership or in a relationship we care about. It's like, I try 100%, you try 100%, and we all make this as good as it can be. None of this like 50-50, like I'll half-ass it and then, only if you do what I want. If that happens though, and they ask for something in order to help you get what you want, it just really changes the attitude when we are really very aligned and having that conversation. And really at this part of the cycle, our brain really supports us in doing that. Can we get to that kind of place at another time? Yes, but this is again where the flowing with it, if this is the easiest time where you can tap into that, why not? Just if that's the time to do it, check that out. And that also for something like communication is good practice, because sometimes we're going to have to pull it out at times where it's not ideal. And having done it when we were supported in doing so, it then becomes easier to get to that point and really step into that next level, whatever it is that it looks like. All right, so happy communicating. I hope that there's a lot of kind of insight and intentionality that you gain from this kind of experience. I would love to hear how it went for you. I'm loving the screenshots, and just do a story, like screenshot this podcast, do a story. Let me know what your takeaways have been and what your experience has been. I really, really appreciate when you do that, because I'm very interested to see how this all shakes out in practical applications for all of us, right? May and I are always watching ourselves or the ladies we work with, but the more info gets shared with me, the more I can create things that are the most supportive for what you need. So thank you so much for doing that. And if you haven't done it yet, I would love to see it. What you have to say is really important, and I want to know about it. Alrighty, I will catch you guys tomorrow, and I hope that you have a great day.
Thanks for coming out to hang with us on the podcast. It is our goal to transform the way women are treated in healthcare. And we need your help. We need your help to get the word out. We have a lofty goal of 1 million downloads. And we know that as this podcast grows, we're going to be able to reach more women, get more amazing speakers for you, and bring the most cutting-edge information.
If you found these podclasses helpful, please take a moment to text 5 women you know the link to the series. We appreciate your help so much. Can't wait to see you next time.